So I wanted to start this program with a little bit of a dedicated reading to our friends at CSIS. It's referring to NIST's 9/11 Commission, and it's referring to NC Star 1. The title is Federal Building and Fire Safety Investigation of the World Trade Center Disaster, Final Report on the Collapse of the World Trade Center Towers. Now, the reading that I want to dedicate and read from is taken from Catherine Fletcher. She's a representative at NIST, and it was a letter from her to Dr. Wood. It was a response. And here's the quote. As stated in NC Star 1, NIST only investigated the factors leading up to the initiation of the collapses of the WTC towers and not the collapses themselves. So that's pretty profound. Here you have a representative from NIST that is telling us that they didn't investigate the collapses. Weren't they paid $15 to $20 million for those, I believe? Maybe my guest, Andrew Johnson, will have a little bit more enlightenment on that issue. Hello, Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks, and Mike, and thanks for inviting me back onto the podcast.
So how about that little reading there? That's pretty eye-opening, right? Because everybody, well, no, go to the 9/11 Commission. They always refer to it. And then you could even say, hey, well, why not stop there? Why not go into the specific part that deals with the quote-unquote collapses? And but then you have this curious statement from Catherine Fletcher. I don't know if you could misconstrue that to mean anything else other than what's there.
Yeah, it is very strange. I mean, when we came across that, when we got that letter, I think back in 2007 or 2008, I can't remember the exact date on that without going to refer to the actual document. It was, quite a surprise because it was essentially an admission of fraud on its face, because the title of the report was The Collapse of the World Trade Center Towers. That was the name of the report for which the request for correction was filed. So that statement right there that you read out, those couple of sentences was, we didn't investigate the actual collapse, only the events up to the collapse. Well, the report then should have been titled The Events Up to the Collapse of the World Trade Center Towers, an Investigation Thereof, So
Oh, it's funny too, because it's not the collapses, or the collapses aren't investigated. The the initiation isn't investigated, but the factors leading to initiation. So what does that even mean?
Well, indeed, it's like, oh well, actually, we didn't do anything really. We just kind of, we're saying that planes crashed and the buildings came down because of the weight. And that's basically it, and that's your $16 million spent. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And a few private companies went ka-ching. And that was that basically. But at the very least, I suppose, being a little bit less cynical, those documents, the 10,000 pages of NIST reports, which you can download, they are publicly available. As I've said before in a couple of other interviews, they do contain a lot of information, and so you can use them to do your own investigation, essentially, which is essentially what Dr. Judy Wood did. She used a lot of that data in her own investigation, and thereby, you do allegedly have some reliability to that data. It can't all be wrong. At least, even if the conclusions are wrong, the data can be still totally valid. So that there is that to consider, of course, and that's what she did. And we thought that people like Catherine Fletcher were actually kind of, because that was such a ridiculous statement. Really, the one that you read out, it's kind of ridiculous when you can stop to consider it, because it is so ridiculous. You have to wonder if it's kind of like covering something else up in terms of, well, look, I'm sorry, Dr. Wood, but we've done all we can do here. We know basically that, you are right, but my hands are tied. If I was to do anything about this and speak out, it would be career suicide, etc., or worse even, and therefore we can't do anything. Sorry, but I'm going to say something ridiculous so that people can read between the lines of what I'm saying and work out, what it means.
So, absolutely, in a way, I guess Catherine either knowingly or unknowingly helped us all out. And just to mention, too, that all this stuff about the court cases, the RFC, the Keatam case, you can get it on Dr. Wood's site, but the link that you provide on your site is right from the Office of the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Commerce. So this is a .gov site. This is legit. They're posting it there. There's no secret about it. I guess the secrets, if you keep them in plain sight, I guess it works a lot better than just trying to hide it all the time, right?
Right. And those documents, they are all there still. Last time I checked, the links I had didn't work because they'd reorganized the site. And I know there was also later the report done on building number 7 where they had a public consultation, kind of. And originally when that was done, I think in 2009, 2008.
Is that where Jerry Leapart went in?
Well, he went in, I think, and made comments for both the original NC Star 1, which was the report on the collapse of Towers 1 and 2, or alleged collapse, I should say,
the
destruction.
Yeah.
The title, yeah. But then they also did a separate report on building number 7, which came out, I think, about 2 years or 3 years later. I think I can't remember if it came out in 2007 or 2008.
It was delayed a lot, and I remember that the truth movement often was like, oh, they're trying to hide. They won't give us this report. They won't give us this report. So I remember kind of finding out about that way that they hadn't released it right away. And I mean, I don't really have a comment on that because I'm not there in the administration part of NIST or whoever's doing this. So.
I think that, there was this sense, well, I mean, we followed that fairly closely. There was this sense that they were stalling a bit. I think, obviously, from their, area of the playing field, so to speak, they were trying to make it as good as they could make it, as convincing as they could make it. But what I was just mentioning about the documents was there was a number of public comments were posted by people like Kevin Ryan, and I think there were a couple of other people that posted comments as well that were well known in the so-called truth movement. But then all those documents have now been collated into a single document, and NIST have actually got this big, massive, long 250-page document or something, which has got all the public comments in one document, which they were all split out before, so they did. I mean, that's not particularly interesting to people. I just thought it was interesting that they actually merged these all together in some time since I last looked. But they haven't really tried to hide anything in particular in that way. They haven't hidden the report. And like I say, the report itself does contain a lot of valuable information. It's just that the conclusions are obviously, hopelessly wrong.
Well, that's a big thing. We found out that I believe it was through one of Dr. Wood's responses or letters about this about these court cases, was that I think it was Catherine Fletcher or another representative. They actually said, now don't quote me exactly, but the contractors were hired to give the data and not interpret it, and that was NIST jobs to interpret the data. And we later found out that interpreting data wrong is not illegal. What would be illegal is putting incorrect data in. So most of the data, as far as I can tell, is correct in these 9/11 Commission and the NC Star 1 and any of the other reports, but it's the interpretations based on those data that you're kind of like, whoa, what's going on? And the average Joe, how are they going to understand numbers in a graph,
Well, this is it. And so they were trying to sort of argue it on technicalities like that. And it was very surprising. Again, another surprising statement that you've highlighted there, that, they said, we just asked them to collect these reports, but we were going to have the kind of, interpretation of that. I mean, it's kind of just ridiculous, really, that these firms like Applied Research Associates that, have these huge government contracts from the Department of Defense, they must have well-qualified people. They're not just going to supply tables of data, or they shouldn't be just doing that. the notion of that is just silly, really.
It's a scapegoat because then NIST could say,
Yeah.
well, they were in the contract. They're not allowed to interpret it. You just give us the raw data. So then it's a way out for ARA. They don't have to answer anything. And we saw how the court case went. It just gets dismissed. It doesn't even get its chance. So ARA really is not under fire. Neither is SAIC. And one that I always, when I started looking into the contractors too, was Leslie Robertson, the structural engineers that built the building. I figured it out. It's rough math, so don't mark my words, but it was about 5,700 of those prefabrication unit, the wheat checks, should have been present at the site. Shouldn't Leslie Roberts have been, we're missing quite a bit, you know? That didn't go across their mind, but then again, you realize that, okay, they're allowed to provide data, but they're not allowed, that's an interpretation, and that's NIST's job to interpret it.
Right. And I mean, as I recall, you know, we were arguing that this was, you know, negligence. It was negligence of those obvious facts, basically, like the one you highlighted there, and many similar ones. You know, and I remember creating a list, going through. I think we went through the original contracts which were posted, and then we listed the reasons why those contracts haven't been, you know, fulfilled, basically, by these companies, and that was obviously the basis for the data quality submission. You know, that they'd not met. You know, I mean, from an engineering perspective, you know, we talk in terms of user requirements, and if you develop a system, then you have user requirements for that development. You know, you have a paying customer somewhere, and then you have an acceptance test, whereby you determine whether that what you deliver meets the requirements. And that's essentially what those contracts were drawn up for, you know, user requirements. And then, you know, has it met the user requirements? I mean, we could clearly illustrate that they had not met the user requirements, yet they were still signed off as being a valid report, you know.
Fraud.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what
even the underwriter's laboratory thing, where they made the mock-ups of the floors, they burnt them at twice the heat for twice as long, couldn't get them to fail, and then yet they signed off on the report saying that they failed or that the test was conclusive, or mind-blowing when you actually look into it. But again, the average person isn't going to look into it. So I'm just waiting to say something about the destruction of the complex, and someone say, "Oh, haven't you read the 9/11 Commission?" I say, "Yes, I've looked into it. Have you read NC Star 1? Have you read the title? Have you heard what Catherine Fletcher has to say about it? Have you looked into any of the court cases having to do with it?" And I mean, that's going to shut them up, because the average person, they're lucky if they know the phrase 9/11 Commission, you know? Usually it's just, didn't the government investigate that?
Exactly. And, you know, very few people are familiar with NIST anyway. You know, I don't think I've done one interview where I said, you know, said NIST, and people have like nodded their head, or, you know, said, "Oh yeah, that's the National Institute for Standards and Technology, isn't it?" And I've gone, "Yeah, that's right." I don't think I've ever said that. You know, you're probably one of the few people that's done interviews who actually know, you know, what NIST is and what its role was, you know, broadly speaking, or even in detail, you know.
This is
people
critical.
have never heard of it.
This part's really critical because, again, people, you see 9/11. 9/11 was in such job. 9/11 was in. So we demand a new investigation. Well, shouldn't we look before we even do anything? Can't we just look at what's already there? Look at the quality of it. Look at how it was conducted. Look at who conducted what. Just take in all the information, even if you can't sort it. And I mean, there's so much to look over, and I've just hit the tip of the iceberg. But even I've found stuff that'd make me say, "Hey, $15 to $20 million." When Dr. Morgan Reynolds were on, and we were kind of just joking, I was like, wow, could you imagine what Dr. Wood could do with an investigation with that kind of budget? You know, it's crazy. 15 to 20 million just spent on nothing, on a bunch of wrongly interpreted data, a bunch of the actual 9/11 Commission must be just the stack. Like the book itself, I've rented it from the library, and it's a sleeping pill. It's very dry. It's all technical stuff, a lot about who was here when this was there and stuff like that. Not really relevant to the buildings coming down. If you actually want to look into it, it's NC Star 1. Look through that, and you're going to be shocked, because there's stuff there that's going to make you scratch your head. I can't quote anything. It's not right in front of me, and even if it was, it's really long. So
it's 10,000 pages. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 10,000 pages, and it's
for the whole, I mean, split into sections, but yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that's 10,000 pages split up between seven reports or something like that?
Something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but I I think it was basically, so it might have been more than that, because I think it was basically one report per contractor, and I think there were 23 contractors.
Oh,
So
okay.
there may be sort of 23 sub-reports within that 10,000 pages. It would be my guess. So yeah, it's a monster, it really is. But
Oh, and two, I saw these videos, you see them all the time, and there's a lot of firsts on 9/11. I saw one yesterday that I hadn't seen before, and they were inside of WTC 5, and in the middle, a roof not collapsed over it, and then a whole floor gone from under it. And the guy's talking, he's like, "No, this is the first time this has ever happened." It was the guy recording inside. Don't know if the audio is the real audio, but he's like, "No, they never fail like this. It never fails where there's a roof on top. This is the first time that it happens," and that the first time comes up so much when you're looking into 9/11 work, like. And to people, they'll just be like, okay, coincidence. Then you get stacked up, and I mean, things like the Alaskan magnetometer data. How do you even make sense of that if you haven't studied all the evidence? And then if you have studied all the evidence and you look at it, you can't say that that's coincidence. There's no possible way that the odds in that all being coincidence on this day is like, I can't even picture the number. It's greater than you could ever calculate.
that said, I mean, it is very difficult for people to deal with, because it's just, as we may have covered last time, it's off the radar screen for most people. They just don't know what they're looking at. They can see these anomalies, but and this is why the book is Where Did the Towers Go book is kind of almost required reading, really, because that helps you piece it all together. And the cost of that, it's like $40 compared to 10 million, so it's a bargain, really.
Well, I actually feel so confident in the book that I told somebody that I've been talking to through Reddit there, and I don't think he had the book yet, and I said, listen, I said it many times in the thing, so it was clear. I said, buy this book, study it, and if you can articulate why it's wrong or why you feel you waste your time or money, I will buy that book off of you. And then I'll buy it off of him, tell him to ship it to someone else or something like that. But that's how confident that I feel that I don't know how they would refute me. You can't refute evidence. I mean, you can't call it theory, because that'd be incorrect use of the word. Conspiracy theory is the 9/11 Commission. It deals with a conspiracy and it has a theory. Where did the towers go does not. It has a few conclusions based on what you can rule out and based on the evidence seen at the site, but those aren't theories. Theories are something that I just don't know. People, it sounds like they're just comfortable in using whatever word comes to mind, and theory happens to be it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the way that the language has been framed for them, up to this point. So yeah.
They want the end result too. They don't want to know what happened, because either it's too horrible for them to think about, but they just want, who did it, why they did it, and I could sleep at night. And that's not going to get anyone anywhere, especially if they want a new investigation. Saying a new investigation is thermite, starting there is not a great way to start an investigation. So I guess this kind of ties into it too. This next part is about, I often see in the 9/11 truther community, they refer to the hotspot map, the NASA airborne visible infrared imaging spectrometer. It was AVIRIS, and I actually looked into it myself, and I was rather surprised, because they tell you on this page, on this pubs.ugs or usgs.gov. I won't read out the whole URL, but they tell you exactly what goes on there. They're interpreting data. They said that they're interpreting infrared data to mean heat. Well, they didn't even say to mean heat. They just say they interpret infrared data. So any infrared signals coming off of the ground where they're scanning. By the way, they have this camera system, and it takes 224 individual scans of an area and does that so many times. And it's from a plane. Most people think it's from a satellite, or at least that's the way it's come across to me. Some people go, haven't you seen the satellite image? No, it's actually from a plane. And its job was to its job was to gather data, and one of the functions of it was to gather infrared data, and infrared data doesn't necessarily mean heat. And a great example of that is we didn't have steam explosions. People were walking above those, and as far as I know, that was surface temperature that they're trying to claim is 1400 degrees. An overhead picture could easily see 1400 degrees. You'd be able, and that just wasn't apparent on the site. So little things like that, people cling on to this map and thing. And it's funny, because the truther community often quotes this, and they're the first one to dispel government information, and this is right from a government source. So literally, by their own logic, it could have been faked and given to them. And but yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think you've covered most of the points there, Mike, and a few that I wasn't aware of. Certainly, that's great that you've gone to that level of detail in studying that image, because it has been the sort of their trump card, as it were.
Temperatures.
They think is a trump card to say, oh yeah, this proves there was this heat there in the in the basements of the towers. This is where all the molten metal was. This is the forensic proof of that. And of course, it's no such thing, because that's like, I think there's maybe, how many pictures are there? Is it one or two? I don't think there's any more than two sort of graphs of that. And as you say, it's an interpretive set of data, and we've suggested that whatever imaging system is being used is maybe picking up an infrared signal, but it's not necessarily being generated from the heat in the ground. It could be at a higher level in the air, or it could be some other process which is causing the sensor to be triggered, but it's not the normal process, by which it would be triggered. There's something else happening as well, which is not understood, because that would, we know that the other processes that were going on at the World Trade Center are certainly not understood in the white world, and that's much of the cover-up has been to prevent people even talking about those processes, such as those in the Hutchinson effect, and this degradation of materials, molecular dissociation, and several other bits of description we could bring in based on what evidence has been gathered. So, the thermal image, what is it really showing? I mean, based on that, we don't really know, and certainly it's not showing heat in the normal sense, because we have pictures from the basements where that heat is alleged to have been, and I can't remember, they're claiming it's like thousands of degrees.
1,400, I think, was the top. It was 700 to 1,400, and
700. Okay.
As far as we know, that's surface temperature, because the picture showing us, it doesn't say that that's underground. It just says this is the picture, this is the thermal. And another thing too, people don't realize, that I didn't even realize, is you need a ground calibration too. Somebody was on the ground at each of those sites calibrating it. So that's just another factor that might lead into a mishap, because what if his calibration's off? It's not as easy as flying this plane over and it tells you, boom, temperature, go. They had to get all this data back. They said they recorded up to 75 terabytes a day, I believe it was, in this plane. And this is older technology too. Brought it back, interpreted the data, then released it. They did rush the hotspot thing to get it out to the ground zero workers. But even then, they said, this one was taken on the 16th with all the hotspots that's really quoted. And then the 23rd, it looks like nothing's there. But yet fires burned underground 99 days, they were saying. Just nothing adds up, so you can't say that this is heat, especially when you take it to that next level and look at how this thing is conducted.
Well, that's very interesting. Again, you studied that more in depth than I have, certainly, and that's very interesting to know. So that's useful information to me. So yeah, I mean, there's those things right there that you've said. I don't really feel I can add much over and above what I've already said. That's that's going to be of any additional sort of to augment that, because you raise several key points, and those are ones that people should be paying attention to.
It's of great value to them too, not only to hear that information I gave out, but to say, hey, he did this, I can do this. So don't stop at that. If somebody gives you that picture of something, find out where that picture is from, find out how it was made, find out how it was compiled, and then find out who compiled it. Like you'd never contact people. He never got back to me, but I actually had emailed probably months and months ago Dr. Sean Aher, and he was in charge of getting the LiDAR data, because I have access to a 3D printer. I wanted to see if I could get the LiDAR data, import it in, and then 3D print a composite of what was left at the site, and then print a real one and have it a visual, like 3D printed model there. And I never got, university professor, he's a doctor, so he's probably busy and stuff, like not medical doctor, but whatever he's in. And but no, he never got back to me. Not like I really expect everyone that get back to me, but you can't just stop at taking somebody's word for it. Dr. Wood's book, that's what I tell everybody. It's not, don't read this, don't let it be the end. That's a resource. That's an excellent resource to conduct your own research. The greatest things that I found from Dr. Wood's book was taking those official government links to each photo, then chopping off the end and getting the parent folder, and then just browsing in the parent folder, because you'll find collections and collections that you can't really find under Google Images or anything. They haven't been archived in that way, and they haven't appeared on websites. I mean, just for that way of alone, I've found pictures of people getting their boots hosed off, washing dogs' feet, taping their boots up, duct tape all over boots, and that just deals with the steel toe disintegration or whatever they're saying without the burnt feet. Little things like that, bent beams.
Yeah, that's great.
Everyone out there can do the research, but having Dr. Wood's book is going to be easy. That's like doing an English paper without a thesaurus or without a dictionary. You know, you need one of those around to have as a reference. So if you have any questions, you get your feet wet with Dr. Wood's work. You'll learn more than like you'd ever learn anywhere else, first off, but you get your feet wet there, then take the work, make it your own, do your own work, so that at the end of the day, we could remove Dr. Wood from this. And not trying to take the praise away from her or anything, but this is all standalone stuff. Anybody at any time, anywhere could get these results. She's just kind of the one that was showing us this all.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's great, Mike, that you've gone to that level of detail, and it's very important to do that. And then, because if you find anything which contradicts the overall argument and the overall conclusions, then that's how it is.
Well, you always find stuff like the other day. It took them we didn't think that they reported on Hurricane Aaron, but they did. Just took them 13 years, right? I found that article the other day. I linked you to, and 13 years later, there was a casual mention, and that's great because now it's in the public domain. If anyone says, "Hey, they didn't report on it," they could be like, "Well, haven't you seen this article?" Actually, I've found two after, and that just goes to show you that you could look and you'll find stuff like that other people haven't found yet.
Absolutely, and you'll find either you're going to find that it confirms what is in the original set of evidence, or it refutes it. And both are valuable, of course, because in each case you're going to better your understanding of what actually went on. But the basis behind what's in Dr. Wood's book has not been refuted. And so that's been certainly from a personal, sort of perspective, that's been my overall driving force, in that what's in that is still, it's stood the test of time, because, it's solid, it's true, basically, and it's not going to stop being true just because somebody on the internet said it's not true. Just because the mainstream media ignores it, it's not going to make it untrue.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings us on to another major thing. If people listen, they would have heard, I mentioned it in the last one with Dr. Reynolds, I mentioned it with you, the Richard Gage Ask Me Anything on Reddit. So I was back home for the break, and I was telling my brother about it. I'm like, yeah, he didn't look, he made himself kind of look like an ass. He didn't he just quoted from his website. He went over here and, so I went to go load it up, and all of a sudden I see imposter, fake under the search results. I'm like, what? So I discover right there that allegedly, that was a fake Richard Gage imposter that had went onto the boards. And I could read the backstory in a second. I just want to give an overview. And I guess answered almost like Richard Gage would. It was amazing to me, because when I heard this, I was like, because I'd read his answers to other people's questions and mine, and it was worded how he would word them. He said things that I've heard him say before. It all just kind of, it was like, wow, if this was a fake, why would the imposter try and get that close to the real thing? And two, before I get into it and reading anymore, is this the first you've heard of any 9/11 imposters, or people trying to give fake interviews or passing them off as something? I haven't heard of it before.
Not in that way. I mean, I can think of a sort of example, but it's really different to what you've just been saying, and this is where I'll only mention it because it's sort of, it is the closest I can think of to an impersonator, even though it was obvious that it wasn't an impersonator. It was where this Lorraine Murray character had this radio program with Alfred Weber, and she'd gone through this list of evidence on Dr. Judy Wood's website at the time. This was before the book came out, and said, oh yeah, so it was Dr. Wood's study that convinced me that HAARP was used to destroy the World Trade Center. and she went through all the sort of, toasted cars and everything. And then I think it was about a year later or something, or 6 months later, there was some caller who called into an interview with Dr. Wood on, some other future program, and said, I thought you said it was HARP that destroyed the World Trade Center. I says, no, I've never said that. That was somebody doing an impersonation of me. But of course, Lorraine Murray wasn't using the name Dr. Judy Wood. She was using her own name, and it was just this caller had got confused about, because Lorraine Murray was also, obviously female. I think she just got confused because of that.
Yeah, well, no, it's straight up. That's what they're saying here. That was imposter.
Yeah.
So I'll read it says, I guess this is a summary later. First of all, I'll tell everybody that they picked all new moderators. I don't know if they picked all new ones, but to my knowledge, they flushed out all the moderators of this board and they got all new ones in. I guess the backstory, it says, one of our moderators spent a few weeks setting up an AMA with Richard Gage through the user AE911Truth, so that was their username, who was for months misrepresenting himself as a representative of the organizations. And then it said, an AMA was conducted under the username Richard_Gage, Gage. Both accounts were deleted simultaneously when other users began to unravel the conspiracy after the later statements by Rob Balsamo, I believe his name is, Rob, the pilot. Yeah. So he basically, I guess Rob was doing an AMA, and somebody asked him about a question that was on Richard's, and Rob said that he didn't think Richard did it, and then Rob contacted Richard, and Richard said he didn't. I don't know Rob Balsamo or whatever his name is too much. The only thing that I know from him is that Dr. Reynolds said that Rob said that he'd never admit that there was no planes used at 9/11. So, I mean, that's kind of eye-opening right there. Somebody that says that they'll never admit. So anyways, Rob said that about Gage, and anyways, they said that whoever was behind the two accounts engaged in behavior that was clearly designed not to simply mislead the subreddit. It says nearly 6 months ago they attempted to set up an AMA on 9/11Truth, but rather to attack and slander the reputation of Mr. Gage. This was very disconcerting to the lengths that user went to provide false verification and forced us to raise our standards for future AMAs. We want to be clear that this is not a short con. The user had been impersonating the organization for months, and this is something that we are taking quite seriously, which is to say this reaches beyond normal Reddit meta drama and directly impacts the reputation of the actual person. We have held off commenting formally until the admins were given the opportunity to look into the situation. Unfortunately, they are not going to be able to divulge any information surrounding this conspiracy. We have reached out to Mr. Gage, this is a great part, and expressed our deepest sympathies for falling to victim of this conspiracy. We apologize profusely to the users for the slanderous impersonation. Although we have just begun recruiting AMAs, we have now substantially raised the standards for proof for future interviews, so we won't happen again. We'd like to extend a thank you to Mr. Rob Balsamo, I still can't say it, and I'm Italian, for uncovering this conspiracy, and also thanks to another user who alerted us of the statements. So after this had occurred, I guess somebody got in contact with Richard and asked them, I don't know if they saw him in person, they were like, well, would you ever do one? And it's just nope, just like that. I mean, I could understand because he might not know about it, but it was just a flat no information on it. Now, the weird things about this was they said that this person had been playing a long con, while the person that was using it wasn't using Reddit as somebody who was on Reddit for a while would. First of all, when they posted an AMA, they posted on the actual thread declaring that there would be an AMA from the day before, or from the afternoon, and not their own thread. And then he started his own thread saying Richard Gage AMA. So it's just weird because even that little detail of somebody who's not used to the board was translated through this. And yet this was a guy that was supposed to be conning them that was familiar with Reddit. Maybe he's a mastermind and everything, and it's kind of odd that a lot of the statements that were made there was supporting him. Before I get into reading some random statements and stuff that this supposed Richard Gage made, wouldn't you think he would want to at least attempt to clear his name or give a bit more detail why he wouldn't do an AMA? First of all, this is a great format because it's not like me talking to you in person. You're going to rush me for time. I've seen many interviews where he's closing up or someone has to take time out of his interview. This is, you're in front of a computer, all the information's there, all the links are there. It's the ideal way for anybody that wants to sift through lots lots of information or a little bit of information or get correct links. So it's a very unique thing to a unique way to communicate to a person through AMA.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that that would be absolutely crucial, especially this, or even just for him to post or say possibly? He just apparently just said flat out no.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's all very strange. I'm, you know, as you were saying, I've never heard of this situation arising before, where, you know, if for example the AMA had gone like this: I'm Richard Gage, ask me anything you like, and then somebody posted a question about thermite or something, and Gage had said, no, you know, I think it was a plane crashers and Al Qaeda that had done it. You know, in other words, this impersonator had gone back to the official story, or had said something utterly ridiculous. Then you could imagine that there really was an impersonator, and it was an attempt to muddle up, you know, what Richard Gage has said, even though we know it's false. You know, it could have still been another kind of strange type of psychological operation. So, but the fact that somebody went onto this forum to impersonate him, allegedly, and then said something very, very similar to what he would have said, and it wasn't really detrimental to him personally or to his case. I mean, who would do that? Who would waste that sort of time and that effort, but with no real motivation? In other words, from what was posted and what I don't think I read absolutely all of it, but I read enough of it, I think. There was nothing in there which I felt was any different to what Richard Gage would have normally said. In the other interviews and presentations he's done. So as an impersonation, the only reason why I can think that was done as an impersonation was, you know, if I'm trying to sort of work this out as we go along, he was actually doing a public presentation or something, or he was otherwise occupied on the night that he would agree to do that AMA, or the type period of time, whenever it was. So he got somebody else to do it for him, one of his, you know, these other people that sit on this committee that he runs, and gets them all to make tea for him or whatever he does, or coffee or whatever they do, because they don't really do anything
to steer the car.
They don't really do anything to do with establishing the truth of 9/11. I mean, we do know that much. So it is possible that from that point of view that one of his lackeys actually did the AMA, but in essence, that wouldn't have really made any difference in terms of the questioning of it, because it was about 9/11 primarily, I think. I don't think there were any really personal questions about him.
Not really, other than the salary, but that has to do with what he's earning from thing. It's no secret that he draws a salary. That's his job. I mean, the numbers, people say that, I don't know if there's a tax report out, but I don't know if the numbers are there, but the guy draws a salary, and the guy lives in New York, I believe. He doesn't live anywhere cheap, so, you know, he's making a decent amount.
Yeah, and I suppose the only other indication which we discussed in the last interview we did was with that comment that you noted, that where some female poster had come on and said, "Oh, you're a hero of mine," or something. I can't remember the exact quote.
He's like, "Are you single?"
And then he said, "Are you single?" I mean, that, you know, you can imagine an impersonator might have done that, but you'd think, well, even again,
he would have been smarter.
Yeah, they would have done something much worse than that.
What is the point of impersonating somebody if you're going to make it over the top like that? It's obvious that it's fake, you know? And I almost get the feeling like I don't have anything to prove this or anything, but it's like, all right, we'll do the MA. If it goes good, then we'll take credit. If it goes bad, impersonator. Well, I'll be working somewhere else. I had somebody else write it so that I could say, no, I was here at that time, blah, blah, whatever. I mean, again, don't know the facts. Probably will never get those facts. I don't even know how I will, but it just seems too odd that, like you even said, and like I said, that he would almost pick word for word. Like, I'll read this one here. Gage's response, he goes, "Thank you for the question. Allow me to share an important lesson that I learned. Even when something surprises us, we must not not leap to conclusions. The angled cuts in some of the cases are evidence supporting the use of thermitic material, which we see at AE 911 Truth believed to be something like nanothermite. But during the cleanup operations, engineers were deliberately making angled cuts on beams because they wanted the beams to slide away from them onto the rest of the debris pile in a particular matter. This is similar principle to what lumberjacks use when they make angled cuts to determine the way a tree will fall. It is Germany's historic example, which encourages us ever greater vigilance. I think that was referring to something before somebody mentioned Germany, but it was funny. Right after that, somebody commented, "Please answer the questions put forth by Sacchetta." But anyways, when I read that, if I read that to anybody that knew Gage and that, I don't think they would doubt that that's him saying that. And a lot of the comments are like that, just straight up like, I must admit you've raised a good point. I can't say necessarily why NIST didn't get the access. I'm sure if they had, they would have written a very different report. Like, there's tons of stuff like that are just like, okay, why would this impersonator slightly get... doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense any way you think about it.
Absolutely. It's all very fishy, as we discussed this, I think, a week or so ago when you informed me about it. I've never heard of anything like this being done before. But, on one comment I will make is that I think, again, it illustrates the difficulty working with forums, and Reddit is no different. There's a lot of anonymity on there, and there's only a few people use their real names.
Well, me one of them. But what you're supposed to have on an AMA verification, I think this is why they get a heat. You're supposed to have a picture of somebody beside their username with a picture saying, this is me with an AMA verified, or a video or something where they mention it, or they plug it on their Twitter or something like that. And I guess that's where this got much heat, because I guess that wasn't done. I guess this guy had been talking to the people, the mods, whoever he was contacting to get in. He's done it long enough that wasn't a suspicion or something like that. But usually, yeah, it's always verified. And I'm pretty sure it had the little check beside his name, which means verified. So I guess the moderator passed them off. So again, that could be a reason why they had to clean house with the mods. But it's all too convenient, and it's all too just muddles up the water, because now in everybody's eyes, wow, there's impersonators out there, and now we're not going to hear from Richard Gage on AMA. So I'd still like to ask him my questions. Richard, are you listening to this? I want to talk to you one-on-one right now. I would really love you to answer my questions. I have them all listed here. You may have seen them, you may have not. I can't see any other format that I can get you these questions that you'll answer them fairly, because I've seen the way you've dealt with stuff in videos to Abraham Rodriguez and other people that have mentioned stuff. I don't want to talk about Dr. Wood. I just want to talk about evidence at the site. So please answer these questions so that we don't have these problems, so that we clear all this up, so that we can move forward, right? You want an investigation? Let's investigate. Let's stop being in the way, as I feel you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's why your sort of idea earlier on, that they made this agreement that if it went well, they'd say it was okay, and if there was some problems, they'd disavow it, which is what they appear to have done. I suppose it just then makes you wonder the period of time that elapsed between when they decided to disavow it. I mean, I think the use of this word, what struck me when you were doing that readout as well, another comment I can make is they use this word conspiracy, several times in that description. Well,
to describe it on the conspiracy board.
Yeah, conspiracy, really? Well, it sounds like just one guy decided to do that. Mm-hmm. So one guy decided to, impersonate Gage. That's by definition not a conspiracy. Mm-hmm. That's a deception. Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Or an impersonation. So so the fact that they're using this term conspiracy, does that mean that they're involved in it?
That's a good point. And the difficult thing would be, even on this message board, this is where people come r/conspiracy. How could I, in good faith, ask somebody like you, Dr. Wood, Dr. Morgan Reynolds, to go post on a conspiracy board? This information, it's not to be confused with conspiracy. There's a reason why Richard Gage is on conspiracy, and it would really suck. I see Dr. Wood stuff posted on there, and of course it gets attacked for no reason. Nobody ever looks it up. They always say Star Wars space beam weapon. They see a title of one report. They didn't read made it. What she's telling you in the Star Wars space beam weapon was Star Wars space beams existed. The government made them. It doesn't have anything to do with the destruction at the site. She's just letting you know that this advanced technology exists, and it's no secret. It was SDI program. You could look it up. It was Ronald Reagan's pet. And often it really sucks that that's all people can say about her is ray beam from space, which makes no sense since I've never heard her talk about it. And again, how can you in good faith say, all right, we have some place where people can ask you any questions, but it's a conspiracy board? No, I would not like them to be put in that situation. But then again, you're never going to see Dr. Wood on the actual AMA board, like where Ask Me Anything. They would never they would say, no, this has to do with conspiracy. It belongs in the conspiracy board, and then she'd get labeled right there. So even though they have nothing, they don't know what they're talking about. That's their moderators. They have all the choices.
Yeah, and I mean, Richard Gage probably doesn't really mind being put under the conspiracy label because he's not interested in the truth. I mean, obviously it happens to, when we do various interviews and so on, you get lumped in with all of that stuff. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. But we do actively try and point out that it's not a conspiracy theory. Whereas I don't think I've ever heard Gage say, no, this isn't a conspiracy theory. I don't think he's ever said that.
I think he's actually said things that have made it either calling his thing a theory, or he's said things to indicate that he wants it to be called a theory. But how can it even be a theory, the thermite thing, because they didn't even put it forth in their request for corrections. And now I was told that the link that says thermite wasn't even in the original. Is that true, or was it always in there?
My understanding is that the link to Jones's paper in the request for correction was there from the first version, but that's all it was. There was just a link.
And so this paper was printed out and given to the judges, right? And given to the people at the court case, right? That had the hearing? Is that how that would work?
Which one?
The RFC for like Gage. I forget who actually did it, but
that didn't have a hearing. I mean,
that didn't have a hearing.
Just done by. No, the RFC was just done. That essentially what the RFC was for. When that was submitted, that establishes you as a whistleblower. So that was formed the basis for the fraud case, essentially, because you have to what you think is fraudulent before you actually file the case for scientific fraud, because they could have corrected their report and not been sued had they corrected it, because if they corrected it without being sued, then that would have been okay. Gage et al., they submitted their RFC and all it had was a link to the thermite paper in it. Whoever read the RFC, I've no idea whether they would have followed that link and printed out the paper or not.
That's my concern. That's whoever got it to say, okay, is this case going to go any forward or anything? Did they actually take the time to click that link in that? And why, if this evidence was so strong, why wasn't it in there? Why, for Dr. Wood's case, they just get the report and look at it, and it's all there. They don't have to follow links.
I mean, as you know, the normal way is that if you're talking about something you're referencing, you'll pick out a paragraph, a phrase, you'll use one of the keywords, or something. But this was not done. They did not use the word thermite anywhere in that RFC except in the URL.
Or molten metal.
Or molten metal. So, neither of those two phrases. And yet the case is
so strong. That's all you hear is the case is so. I love when you hear Alex Jones talk about it, because I'll admit I listened to Alex a couple of years ago for just the show because, hey, that's the only other place giving out information. I knew the whole time that it was kind of, all right, Alex, calm down. But you'll hear him. No, we know what happened. We know what happened. It was thermite. It was we have the building reports. We heard the people from bombs. We know what happened. Simple, done. It's done. So what is there to investigate if we know what happened, if we know it was thermite? And that's the attitude for most people. And then they go a step further. Okay, well, no, I have this video where red stuff's leaking out, or I saw loose change. We need you to stop using loose change in little videos for your Bible. You have to be able to understand what you're seeing, and watching one video is not going to do it.
Right.
Awesome.
But yes, so that whole process of the RFC, from Gage, that was part of the deception, and they did that, of course, after Dr. Wood filed hers, so they knew they were going to have to do something that was sort of equivalent, but you could see from looking at it that it was legitimate. That would not going about it in an honest way. It was again another deception.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to talk about, I don't know if you've had the time yourself, but I actually got the 2 site maps of what the Trade Center used to look like and then the new one. And I don't know if you could see or I'll hold it up to the webcam, and I overlaid them. And it's fairly surprising where some of the stuff is. First of all, you don't have anything where the towers used to be. That's now pools of water. Water being the only thing that seemed to help, water and dirt help to quench this effect that kept going on. So it makes sense that this new replenishing, it's a waterfall too on the outside, so the water is continuously moving. That makes a lot of sense why that was there. But then other buildings, like one side of the building they're being on, I believe they extended Vesey Street through the site now, and they extended Fulton, I believe, through the site. It doesn't look much like it used to before, and now they're filling, instead of drilling into the bedrock, they seem to be making these big concrete bases for everything, then putting the beams into there and then building. And on top of it all the towers, or all the buildings now in the complex, are going to be skyscrapers as far as I know, and I believe one's under construction, 3 are built. I know one's built, I think 2's still not built, I believe 3's done, and 4's almost done, and 7's done, I believe. Don't mark my words, but it's an incredibly different site. I urge everyone to overlay the 2 maps and kind of start to think about why this is not being built here, or why they did that, because well, like we saw with Bankers Trust, they built, I believe it was WTC4 on where Bankers Trust used to be, and I think that was it. Let me check right here, and yeah, it was WTC5, sorry, and I believe it's being built, but it's being built back from Bankers Trust, away from where the Ark would have been, as far as I know.
Right, yeah, I've really not looked at the new layout, and I was only familiar with, I think, one World Trade Center was the only one I'd paid any attention to. One of the things that I noticed when we were in 2008, because the replacement building 7 was already open by 2008.
Yeah.
And one thing we did notice when we walked past it is that the lower 8 stories, or that was my guess, I didn't actually count, roughly the lower 6 or 8 stories didn't have any windows in. So it's like a solid, and I think that I read somewhere, I don't know if this is true, but they said, oh, this was to protect against terrorism.
Well, wasn't that what was the reinforced floor in the middle of World Trade Center 7 where the commando post was supposed to be? Wasn't that to prevent terrorism? Yeah, allegedly.
The new version had no windows in the lower 6, 7, 8 stories.
Oh,
like what? What's that about?
And this is kind of off the side, but people don't realize that the seismic impact of the quote unquote plane, well, I'll say the holes in the tower, the first 2 holes, that made a greater seismic impact than WTC7 turning into dust. Well, I guess it was turning into dust the whole day, but where the building was standing and then the building was no longer standing was a less significant seismic impact than these quote unquote holes being made in the buildings in the first place, which is kind of shocking. And not to mention, we've talked about before about the sound, people talking and they over, and you don't hear a building falling down or anything. So, but yeah, the site, and they're all tall now. I believe WTC3 was like 85 floors or something like that. They're all climbing. So it's going to be an interesting thing. I'll send you the overlay later, and you could really see it, because it looks quite different. Like I said, especially since they've extended Fulton and Vesey, because they went right through. I think it's Vesey that they went right through WTC7's old site. I think it's right down the middle, and then on the left side is the new 7 of the WTC7. So again, it's really interesting stuff. Before we go, Andrew, any new kind of things that you've kind of figured out in the last little while, or kind of raised your attention that you could think of?
Well, not particularly. I mean, I've just really been continuing to distribute the book here in the UK. We haven't had a great deal of new developments. We get sort of new bits of video clips cropping up from time to time. I mean, there was another one that was sent to me. I can't remember even if it was you that sent it to me. There was one that was showing us a view similar to the Bob and Bree video.
No, I don't think that was
could see, that you could see the buildings coming down and or not coming down, turning to dust, and you can see the toasted car lot. And there's one particular part that caught my eye in that, where the dust it's coming rolling under the pedestrian bridge, and then just as when it's come from under there, it shoots up into the air. It's like a jet going up.
Yeah.
You know, a very particular jet, almost as if it's gone over something in the ground that's forcing it upwards. So we get, occasionally I get sent videos that I've not seen before, but none of them so far have shown anything other than, they've done anything other than to back up what we already know, and provide even more evidence that how the World Trade Center was destroyed is in line, is precisely in line with what Dr. Wood discusses in the book, and she has been talking about since 2006 or even before.
Oh, absolutely. And two, what was funny, I believe I linked you that article. It was a CNN archive of the morning of the 11th, and it was the 5 a.m. weather report where Hurricane Aaron was sitting right off the coast of New York, and the weather report was completely fine. Like, they didn't have any warnings or anything. But on the info at the side, it said 460 miles away from Nova Scotia. And that's very interesting that that's the number they would mention, 460 miles, because it was only 36 miles west of New York, heading in a straight line from there. But yet they chose to say that it's that far away from Nova Scotia. I don't get how that factors in. How did you know that that was the end place? Like, that's where it was going? Because if you were to track it, it definitely wasn't heading in that direction. And yet...
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you'd probably have to ask one of the weather people about that, because maybe they have some... They regard that as a beacon to the next,
possibly
zone of hurricane
or their recording
formation
station or something there, or something like that. But it was kind of odd that you think when else in history of this modern era have you ever heard of a hurricane, a Category 3? Well, just calm down from a Category 3, as big as it was going to be, sitting 36 miles off of the biggest center in the world, arguably, and there was no mention to evacuate, no mention to nothing. It's just kind of, and like I said, at 5 a.m. they had already reported that it started moving. And you even said, you made a great point that data is misinterpreted and they don't know if that's exactly. And yeah, I completely agree with that. But still, maybe somebody, still at that point, it was literally it wasn't even stopped yet. It was still slightly heading, and then it stopped around, I think it was, I believe, 6, the official reports are, and stayed there for a few hours at a constant wind speed of 80 miles per hour constantly for what? For how many hours? 6 hours at least, or something like that? 8 hours?
Something like that. It was very well controlled. If you look at the barometric pressure and so forth, it was constant for a number of hours. It's really bizarre when you look at that data.
I've never heard of that before, for a storm to be clocked in at the same time. I understand instrument error, but that same amount of time over a certain period of time, and I believe the humidity was stuck, or the barometric pressure. Which one was it? One of them was stuck for the same time.
I think both of them were pretty constant for, I don't know, about 10 hours or something. I can't remember. I'm going back to look at it, but yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, we'll wrap it up for today. I'm sure Andrew will be back in the future. I'd really love to tell people to look at specific things like the Alaska magnetometer data, but like we were talking before, if you off the street don't know anything about this and you see that, you can see that things happen specifically at every single time that there was a major event. Hole 1, hole 2, poof 1, poof 2, poof 7, and then after, and you could see before that it was even, but you're not going to make sense of it. You're going to say, okay, what does this have to do with anything? When really it's just, you have to think, what's the coincidence that a magnetometer station, 6 magnetometer stations have separate readings, all in Alaska, picked up disturbances that were so radical exactly when WTC had all these events. There's no coincidence there. It's something was going on with the Earth's magnetic field. And don't try and say, the planes were hitting to the bedrock and the towers hooked up to the magnetic field and it rang when they got hit or whatever. It's beyond that. It's like I said, I'd love to show you people that and tell you people to refer that, but you're not going to be able to make sense of it, and it's probably going to get butchered and it's going to get thrown back in your face. Just do the research, go through the pictures. Andrew's site is amazing. I listened to his book again the other day. It's great to know about the cover-up because too, that's an important part. Dr. Wood can't cover everything, and it's important that Dr. Wood stick with exactly what she knows and what she can prove, so that nobody can fall back on her and say, oh, but she was there accusing this and that of that. So it's crucial what they're all doing. Anyways, thanks to everyone for listening, and hopefully in the future we'll be back and have some more shows. I'm trying to book some guests now, and hopefully we'll entertain you at least. And again, don't stop doing your research. Just go, once this ends, go and do your own research. That's all I like to say. Anyways, Andrew, thank you for joining us. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.